Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Watercolor Hour. My name is Betty McDowell. I'm one of the librarians here at Pflugerville Public Library. And today we're going to be painting a watercolor succulent. If you picked up your kit, you should have everything you need to complete the project. So go ahead and grab it and we'll get started. So the first thing we want to do is trace our image. I've got my paper here and you can trace it on either side. I like to use the side that's a little bit smoother when I'm doing something that's botanical, because it is a little bit easier to paint the details. So this is our reference photo and it's a succulent from Pixabay. I've removed the background just to make it a little bit easier to see. There were a lot of leaves and things that were sort of distracting. And then I've changed this leaf here. It's a dying leaf. So I just made it a little bit smaller and we're just going to paint it the same way that we're painting all of the others. And we're only using 4 colors today. So for the tracing, you'll notice we've got the outline, but we've also got a bunch of extra lines. Let me pull the line drawing out. So all these lines are just to tell me where these pink areas are, and also to tell me where I need to paint darker. So if you look at this section here compared to this is just telling me this little triangle here needs to be a darker green, because where the leaf kind of folds up, there's a lighter area here just because these leaves are so thick. So that's what all of these little lines are. And as we're painting, it'll become a little bit more obvious why we have all those lines. But for now, I'm going to put this aside and we'll check out our colors. Okay. So we have sap green, which is a really bright yellow green. And we have Hooker's Green Deep, which is a blue green. Payne's Gray, which we're going to use to make our greens darker. And Permanent Red Violet for the edges, which is a really bright pink color. So we're going to be using a mix of these 2 greens for most of these leaves. But we're going to start by doing a light wash of green all over the succulent. Because these leaf edges are not completely white, they're just a really, really light green. That's what we're going to use for our first color. So I'm going to need plenty of water. And then a mix of sap green and Hooker's Green Deep. So this is a really watery shade. I've just got a scrap of paint here that's not quite dark enough. Okay, so we want to make enough to cover the whole painting. Alright, so we're just gonna put this all over the place. Yeah, this whole thing is covered and I can barely see it, but there is just a hint of light green all over this. So we're gonna let this dry, and I may actually speed it up by using my blow dryer, and then we'll come back and start adding some of the darker green. Okay, so this is mostly dry, so we're going to be working on all of the leaves. Now, this is really repetitive, but it's easy because it's basically the same thing over and over. So we're going to make a sort of a medium mix of the sap green and hooker's green deep. So less water, more paint to make it darker. I'm just going to test this out. It's a little bright, so I'm adding more of the hooker's green to make it more of a bluish color. I'm even going to add in a little bit of just a tiny bit of Payne's Gray. Okay. So that's good enough. And I'll make more later if I need it. I'm not too concerned about matching the colors exactly right now. Keep getting paint on my fingers. Okay. So the way that we do this is we're going to get the leaf wet, most of the leaf wet, and then we're going to add our paint to the inside of the leaf. So we want it to be darker here and then get lighter as it goes out. So I'm just adding some water. And we don't want it to go all the way to the edge because we're going to add pink there, and when you mix pink and green, it makes kind of a muddy shade. So we want them to be kind of separate. Okay, so we've got our water on there. Now I'm going to add this on. You can see it spreading out. And if you need to switch to your tiny brush, you can, because I know some of these corners are kind of tight. So we're just spreading the paint out, trying to make sure it doesn't go all the way to the edge. So I rinse off my brush. And now I'm just going to kind of drag this out. And my brush has been rinsed off, so there's no paint on it. So you can see it's darker in the middle there. And we're just going to repeat that. So because this is wet, you don't want to do one of the leaves right next to it right away. So I'm going to jump over here. Same thing as before, just get it wet. And then pick some of this up. And looking at my reference photo here, so you can see it's very, very light. So you really just need the green to be right in here. So I've got it dotted on, and now I'm rinsing off my brush. And running it along the edge here, just so that it's not, so that there's not a line between the paint and the rest of the leaf. And if you need to darken it, you can just add more green paint. All right, now I'm going to skip this one, go down here. And add the dark paint. And I've rinsed off my brush, and now I'm just kind of rubbing it along the edge of the paint there. I'm going to skip over here. Now hopefully, by the time I work my way back there, that will be mostly dry. So this is the leaf that was in the reference photo. It was pretty much dead. So there's nothing to look at for this one. We're basically just doing the same thing that we are with the others, which is making it darker at the base of the leaf and then get lighter as it goes out. And I'm drying off my brush and just picking up some paint here because you can see an area where there's some extra paint just kind of pooling. Okay, so this one's not quite dry yet. So I'm going to work my way to the middle here to this little one. Now for that one, there's a space here. The edge of the leaf where it's really thick is lighter. So I'm just going to be painting this section here and here on the outside with green paint. And I'm going to switch over to my smaller brush for that. Oops. Too much water. I'm just getting it wet. And then taking my paint and dropping it in. Now this section is pretty dark, so you don't have to worry too much about making the edges lighter. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. Just getting that wet. Okay, now we're going to do, let's see, This one is mostly dry, so grab my brush and start filling this in. A little bit of water. And rinsed off my brush and just running it along here. Just touching up these areas. Now I'm going to switch to my small brush and I'm going to fill this space in here. I'm just putting a little bit of water down to help the paint spread out. And that one is this leaf here. I'm just rinsing off my brush and running it along the edge there to make it lighter. So you can see this really is just the same thing over and over on pretty much every leaf. So I'm seeing which area I can work on now. Because this one is not wet along here and this one is mostly dry, I can work on this. And rinsed off my brush and just running it along the edge. Okay. Now I'm going to work on this one over here. This one is still wet, but I'm just going to be very careful not to take my water all the way to the edge of this leaf. And same thing on this side. Now, if this leaf is still wet, you'll want to be careful. And I'm rinsing off my brush. And we need to mix a little bit more paint. So just the two greens. And a little bit of gray. I'm going to see what this looks like before I start using it. Okay, so that's close enough. So now I'm working on this one. And my water's getting kind of a green tint to it, so I'm going to have to switch this out here in just a second. I'm going to grab my small brush and come down here. Right, and then this is the last one down here. The last larger leaf. We still have a couple of small sections that we need to fill in. Just rinse off my brush. And I'm just running it along here. Okay, so we have a couple of sections to fill in. And I'm going to start with, let's see, this one looks mostly dry. So we're going to take our paint, and what we're doing is filling in this little section of the back of the leaf, and this one here, and then there's a little section there. And we'll go ahead and wait on this one because this leaf is still dry. And then we can do this one. So we're going to use a small brush. In the medium shade. And just fill this in. So that makes these two very similar, but we're going to come back with a darker color so that this is more, the line there is more obvious. Okay, this one's still wet, so I'm going to skip that and come over here. Come over here. Section's almost dry, so I'm going to fill this in and just leave a little bit of space. There. Okay, so now we're going to wait for this to dry, and then we'll come back with a darker color. Okay, so some of these have started drying off. Oops, and I missed one. So I'm gonna fill this one in while I'm talking. Since these have started drying off, I'm gonna work on darkening the centers. And then we'll do the pink edges. Okay, so for this one, I've gone from dark to light. So paints along the edge and then just water. Alright, and I see a little section back here too I'm going to fill in. Okay, so now we want a really dark green. Because you can see in here, all of these areas are pretty dark where the shadows are. So in these areas, we want a darker shade. So it's going to be more of the same, but with a darker green. So I'm going to mix some of the Hooker's green with the Payne's gray. too much Payne's gray on that. And test it out and see what I've got. Alright, so that's a really dark shade of green, and I'll add water so you can see how dark it is. So I'm going to add a little bit of sap to that because it's a little too gray. Okay. So that's our dark green. So what I'm going to do with this is use my small brush to add the dark green, and then use my larger brush to kind of spread it out so it's not so dark. Okay, so I know it can be a little scary using the darker colors, but that's what makes the paintings look more realistic, so I look a little bit more three-dimensional. So I'm going to pull my reference photo over just to give me an idea of where I should be adding. And with this, since we're not painting all over the leaf with this color, we don't have to worry as much about jumping around from leaf to leaf trying to avoid all the wet patches. So I'm going to start with this one. And I'm just painting right in the center there. And then I'm gonna take my brush and get it wet. Just run it. So I'm running a stripe of water, hopefully you can see there. And as I get closer to it, I'll help it spread. But what I don't want is to have it look like there's a line between the darker paint here and then the lighter part of the leaf. So that's why I added some water. And if you notice that it does look like there's a line, you can just keep adding water until it spreads out. What you don't want to do is add too much water. So when I'm doing this, I am I'm adding the water, but the brush is not soaking wet, the larger brush. So I've got darker paint, and I've rinsed off my brush, and what I do usually is just get some of the water off there, and just keep doing that until I reach the paint. Because if your brush is soaking wet, it will spread the paint further than you want it to spread. And if you do get too much paint, you can just rinse your brush off and dry it completely and then press it down on the paper and it'll soak up the paint. So I'm just going to keep doing this on each leaf. This leaf here is a little bit more of a darker area, so that's why I'm adding more of the darker paint. Now rinsing off my brush and just adding some water until I get here. And this is darker in this corner here, so I'm going to add a little bit of paint. And there's too much paint there, so I'm just taking my dry brush and picking that up. So for this one, you can see it's pretty dark here, and then there's also the shadow goes into here, so I'm gonna drag it like that. And wet my brush, rinse it off. This is just water. Now this one is pretty dark. If you look at the reference, this whole area has a shadow. I'm going to use more of the dark green paint on this one than I have on the others. And rinse off my brush and dry it off a little bit. And my brush is pretty dry now. I'm just soaking up some of that paint. And then for this one, there's just a little bit of the dark paint here. So I'm actually just going to rinse off my small brush and use that one. So I just added a line of the dark color and then spread it out like that. And over here, and rinsed off my small brush, and I'm just adding water. Until I get to this part. And I'm just jumping around until I get all of them done. And I have my rinsed off brush. Now I'm doing this small leaf here. I'm rinsing off my brush. I'm just getting this whole thing wet. I've got a little green section in here. And I'm grabbing some of that pale green from earlier. I'm just filling this in, but I am leaving a little bit of space along the edge. Okay, I've got a section here that I didn't fill in earlier, so I'm going to do that. I'm making sure that every section has the darker area. And it looks like it does. So now I'm just going to take this and see if there are any spaces where I can just add just a line of dark color. So I'll make this a little bit darker. The center is going to be the darkest. So in here, and here. And then here, I'm just going to make a line with my small brush. So basically just outlining these areas in the center with the dark paint. You don't have to outline all the leaves, but I do want this area in the center to be outlined. So anywhere you see that you think needs to be darker, add some of your darker paint. This little corner here. Okay, now we're going to start with painting the edges. So you're going to want to make sure to get some clean water because you don't want a green tint to contaminate the pink paint. And the last thing we're going to do is work on adding some pink to the edges. So I'm going to use a small brush for that. And I'm actually just going to pull straight from here. adding a little bit of water to my paper because I want it to be pretty dark. So I'm going to start with this one out here. And just run this along the edge. Now this one does kind of extend out, so I'm going to get this wet. And just run water all along here. Now this one doesn't go all the way down, so... And I'm just rinsing off my brush, and I'm going to run it along there with just water. To spread it out. Oops. And this one, there's some pink edge coming along here. And I just rinsed off my brush, and I'm going to run it along there. And I'm rinsing it as I go so that I have clean water. And this one just has a little bit of pink. So I'm just dotting it on. These here don't have any pink. Same for this one over here, it's just got a little bit. So I'm using my brush to just kind of spread it out. This one's just got a little bit of pink along the top. Down here, this is the leaf I kind of made up, so you can do whatever. And I'm just gonna add some pink like that, and then run my brush with water along the edge here. This one's got a pretty defined edge of pink. So I'm just going to run it along there. And it is a little blurry, so you can add water if you want. It's up to you. And over here, it's just got some pink along the top. And you can rotate your paper. It gets kind of hard to keep your hand off some of these sections as you're working. This one up here has pink all along the edge. So So I'm just going to use a small brush. And same over here. And I'm just making sure I didn't miss any spots. I see a little section of green that I didn't fill in. Right here. So I'm going to do that, and I'm just going to leave space in between this section and the pink so it doesn't get mixed up. Okay, and that is your finished piece. Thanks for joining me, and if you'd like to share a picture of your project, I'd love to see it.